Eleanor smiled. You're beginning to understand. Yes, exactly that kind of thinking. Small changes that open experiences to everyone. She handed him a data tablet. I've been watching you today. You've adapted quickly to the new approach. It feels right, Hyun-ki admitted. More natural than the old way. That's because it is natural to treat people as equals, Eleanor said. We have to be taught to discriminate. It doesn't come instinctively. She activated the tablet, showing him a new crew assignment. When we reach Proxima Centauri, I'd like you to remain with the ship rather than taking your scheduled leave. I'm appointing you as Passenger Experience Coordinator, a new position I've just created. Hyun-ki stared at the assignment in shock. But this is a senior officer position. I'm just a flight attendant. You were just a flight attendant. Eleanor corrected him. Now you're the person who's going to help me transform how Galactic Transit Industries approaches customer service across our entire fleet. Outside the observation bubble, the hyperspace patterns shifted to deeper blues as the ship accelerated. The celestial Voyager was pushing its newly repaired quantum drive to maximum efficiency, hurrying toward its destination with renewed purpose. We'll begin with this ship, Eleanor continued. Document everything. The changes we make, passenger reactions, crew adaptations. When we return to Earth, you'll help me present the findings to the board of directors. She touched the transparent dome, her reflection overlapping with the hyperspace patterns beyond. Some of them won't like it. They'll argue that premium passengers will object to losing their exclusive status. They'll claim profits will fall if we eliminate the more visible aspects of class division. Will they? Hyun-ki asked. Eleanor smiled. No, they'll increase. People respond to being treated with dignity. They become loyal to companies that see them as humans first and customers second. As if to prove her point, the door to the observation bubble slid open, and a family from Standard Cabin cautiously entered. They had clearly been given directions by another crew member. Is it okay if we watch from here? The father asked hesitantly. Someone said it was the best view on the ship. Of course, Eleanor replied warmly. This view belongs to everyone aboard. The family moved to the far side of the bubble, exclaiming in wonder at the hyperspace patterns. Hyun-ki noticed how carefully they stayed out of what they perceived as Dr. Washington's space, maintaining the invisible boundaries they were accustomed to observing. Eleanor saw it too. She deliberately moved toward them, engaging them in conversation about their journey and their plans on Proxima Centauri. Within minutes, the artificial distance had dissolved, replaced by genuine human connection. On the final approach to Proxima Centauri 2 days later, Captain Jin addressed all passengers over the ship-wide communication system. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent to New Hope Colony. Please return to your assigned seats for landing procedures. Before we arrive, I want to thank you all for your patience during our unexpected detour to Outpost Epsilon. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Dr. Eleanor Washington, not only for her technical assistance during our crisis, but for her guidance in helping us improve our service philosophy. Throughout the ship, passengers settled into their landing positions. In first class, the wealthy and privileged enjoyed their spacious acceleration couches. In standard cabin, families like Mijas prepared for arrival in more modest accommodations. But for perhaps the first time in the ship's history, every passenger was treated with identical respect and consideration as the celestial Voyager completed its historic journey. Standing on the bridge beside Captain Jin, Eleanor watched the blue-green world of Proxima grow larger in the view screen. The colony's main settlement, New Hope, sparkled along the coastline of the northern continent. It's appropriate that we're landing at New Hope, she said quietly, because that's what this journey has given me. Hope that we can change more than just the technology of space travel. We can change its culture too. Hyun-ki, standing nearby in his new officer's uniform, nodded in agreement. His transformation from biased flight attendant to equality advocate mirrored the larger change beginning throughout the company. The journey that had started with his misguided decision to relocate an elderly woman to the back of the ship had become something much more significant, the first step toward a more equitable future among the stars. The end. Earth-grown, obviously, the man replied without looking up from his financial reports. Excellent choice. It was grown on the North African cooperative farms. I'll bring it right away. Hyun-ki moved to the next passenger, a young student traveling on a scholarship program, one of Dr. Washington's initiatives to promote educational exchange between Earth and the colonies. Would you prefer the synthesized coffee or the earth-grown blend? He asked with identical deference. The student looked surprised at the question. I can choose earth-grown. I thought that was just for premium passengers. All breakfast beverages are available to all passengers on morning service, Hyun-ki explained. Dr. Washington implemented the change this morning. As he continued his rounds, Hyun-ki noticed Captain Jin observing from the cabin entrance. The captain gave him a subtle nod of approval before moving on to his inspection of other ship sections. In the ship's main lounge, Eleanor had convened an impromptu meeting of the senior crew. Though she technically had no operational authority on this journey, she wasn't listed on the command roster. Everyone treated her directives as law. The Celestial Voyager will be our test case, she explained to the assembled officers. Equal respect with differentiated service. Different amenities based on fare structure, but identical courtesy and consideration for every passenger. Senior Flight Attendant Sumin raised her hand tentatively. Dr. Washington, we've always been trained to provide extra attention to premium passengers. They expect preferential treatment. Expectations can be recalibrated, Eleanor replied calmly. Premium passengers will still receive the exclusive amenities they've paid for, larger cabins, better food options, priority boarding, but they won't receive more basic human dignity than anyone else. She activated the lounge's holographic display, showing the Celestial Voyager's passenger manifest organized by cabin class. Look at this distribution, Eleanor continued. 70% of our passengers travel in standard cabin. These are the people building the colonies, maintaining the infrastructure of our expanding human presence among the stars. Yet our service model treats them as an afterthought. She waved her hand, and the display reorganized to show passenger professions rather than cabin classes. Engineers, teachers, medical professionals, and construction workers dominated the standard cabin sections. Business executives, politicians, and entertainers filled the premium cabins. Who do you think will matter most to the future of humanity in space? Eleanor asked quietly. The executives who finance expansion, or the workers who build and maintain it. Both are essential. Both deserve our respect. Throughout the day, subtle changes rippled through the ship's operations. The boundary zones between cabin classes became less strictly enforced. Standard cabin passengers were no longer discouraged from visiting the observation lounges. First-class children played alongside children from other sections in the ship's recreation area. In the standard cabin, Meija noticed the difference immediately. When she requested a specialized meal for her son's dietary restrictions, the attendant didn't dismiss her with a reminder about standard cabin limitations. Instead, he checked the inventory and brought a suitable option from the first-class menu. We're making adjustments to our service protocols, the attendant explained. Dr. Washington believes dietary needs shouldn't be determined by cabin class. By midday, passengers began to notice the shift. Some premium passengers grumbled about their spaces being invaded by standard passengers. Others embraced the change, engaging in conversations they would never have had otherwise. A wealthy terraforming investor found himself discussing colony water purification challenges with an environmental engineer from standard cabin. Their conversation quickly attracted others, evolving into an impromptu problem-solving session in the ship's main lounge. Hyun-ki observed these interactions with growing satisfaction as he completed his regular duties. When his shift ended, he found Dr. Washington waiting for him near the crew quarters. "Walk with me," she said, leading him toward a rarely used observation bubble on the ship's upper level. The small transparent dome offered a breathtaking view of hyperspace. swirling patterns of blue and purple energy flowing around the ship's quantum field. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Eleanor said as they stood beneath the spectacular light show. "Most passengers never see this view. It's not officially restricted, but the entry corridor is unmarked. Only crew and frequent travelers know it exists. Should we add it to the ship information tablets?" Hyun-Ki suggested. "I built galactic transit industries to connect worlds," Eleanor continued softly. "Not just physically through faster ships, but socially by bringing diverse people together in shared experiences. When you moved me to standard cabin, you unintentionally gave me the opportunity to observe how deeply we're failing at that second mission." Hyun-Ki felt the shame rising again, but Eleanor raised her hand to stop his apology. "I don't want your guilt, Hyun-Ki. I want your understanding. More importantly, I want your help to change things." She led him away from the observation window and down another corridor. They passed workers of various species, humans from different Earth regions, Proximans with their distinctive blue-tinted skin, even a few Centaurian maintenance specialists with their 4 arms working simultaneously on complex equipment. "Notice how they work together," Eleanor said. "No artificial hierarchies, just shared purpose." They entered the station's main concourse, a vast open space with high ceilings and massive viewports showing the starfield beyond. Passengers from the Celestial Voyager and other docked ships mingled freely. Food vendors offered cuisine from a dozen worlds. Street performers demonstrated cultural arts from various colonies. "This is what space travel should feel like," Eleanor said, gesturing to the diverse crowd. "A melting pot of humanity and alien cultures, sharing experiences without divisions." Hyun-Ki noticed a group of passengers from the Celestial Voyager, a mix of people from all cabin classes gathering around a table. Among them was Mija and her children, sitting beside a wealthy businessman he recognized from first class. They were sharing a meal and laughing together. "That wouldn't have happened on the ship," he observed. "No, it wouldn't," Eleanor agreed. "On the ship, we maintain invisible barriers. We reinforce the idea that some people deserve better treatment than others based on what they can pay." She turned to face him directly. "I'm not suggesting we eliminate different service levels or cabin classes. Economic realities require tiered pricing. But there's a profound difference between offering varied amenities and treating people with varied respect." Hyun-Ki nodded slowly. "I understand now. I've been trained to see passengers as their cabin class first and as people second. And that's what needs to change," Eleanor said firmly. "When repairs are complete and we continue our journey, I want you to help me implement a new approach. Equal respect with differentiated service." She smiled at his confused expression. "It means we can offer different comfort levels based on what people pay, but we never offer different levels of dignity based on who they appear to be." As they continued their walk through the station, Hyun-Ki felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. His mistake hadn't ended his career. It had opened a door to something more meaningful. Dr. Washington wasn't looking for an apology. She was looking for an ally in transforming the company culture. "Why me?" he finally asked. "After how I treated you, why give me this opportunity?" Eleanor stopped and studied him thoughtfully. "Because you made the mistake so perfectly. You demonstrated exactly what needs to change. And because when confronted with your error, you acknowledged it honestly. That's rare, Hyun-Ki. Most people defend their biases rather than examining them." She pointed toward the Celestial Voyager visible through the massive viewport. "That ship can cross between stars in days. It's a miracle of science and engineering. But the greater miracle would be if the people aboard it could cross the divisions we've created between ourselves." Hyun-Ki looked at the elegant vessel with new eyes, seeing beyond its physical beauty to the potential it represented. For the first time since Dr. Washington's identity had been revealed, he felt not shame but purpose. "I want to help make that happen," he said with quiet determination. Eleanor nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. "Good. We begin when we reboard. The quantum drive may be repaired, but our real work is just starting." The repaired celestial Voyager departed Outpost Epsilon, with its quantum stabilizer functioning perfectly. The ship hummed with renewed energy as it accelerated back into hyperspace, its course set once more for Proxima Centauri. But something else had changed aboard the vessel, something less tangible than machinery yet equally important. Hyun-Ki moved through the first-class cabin, serving breakfast with attentive precision. His uniform was the same, his duties unchanged, but his approach to the passengers had transformed completely. He spoke to each person with the same respectful tone, maintaining eye contact regardless of their appearance or status. "Would you prefer the synthesized coffee or the earth-grown blend?" he asked an older businessman. Hyun-Ki made the notation on his tablet, trying to hide his discomfort. Every interaction with Dr. Washington reminded him of his shameful behavior earlier. The weight of it pressed on him constantly. "You're still thinking about it, aren't you?" Eleanor asked suddenly. "Excuse me. Your mistake. The way you treated me." Her dark eyes studied him carefully. "You haven't forgiven yourself." Hyun-Ki looked away. "How could I? I disrespected the founder of my company. I enforced class divisions that go against your core principles. I judged you based on your appearance." "Yes, you did all those things," Eleanor agreed calmly. "The question is, what will you do now?" Before he could answer, the ship docked smoothly with Outpost Epsilon. The gentle thud of connection echoed through the hull, followed by the hiss of pressure equalization. "Walk with me," Eleanor said. "I want to show you something." They disembarked ahead of the other passengers, using the crew access corridor. The station's interior was utilitarian, all exposed metal and functional design. Workers in stained jumpsuits moved purposefully through the corridors, carrying tools and equipment. It was a working station, not a luxury destination. Eleanor led Hyun-Ki through a maze of maintenance tunnels until they reached a small observation room overlooking the main repair bay. Below them, engineers were already examining the celestial Voyager's quantum drive housing. "Do you know what these workers are doing?" Eleanor asked. "They're repairing the quantum stabilizer," Hyun-Ki replied. "Yes, but do you understand what that means? What they're actually touching down there?" Hyun-Ki hesitated. "Not exactly. My training focused on passenger service protocols, not engineering." Eleanor nodded as if she had expected this answer. "That's part of the problem. You serve aboard a vessel you don't understand. You move through space using technology you can't comprehend. It creates distance, separation, from the reality of what we're actually doing." She pointed to a cylindrical component being carefully extracted from the ship. "That's the primary quantum field generator. It manipulates space-time at the subatomic level, creating a bubble of altered reality that allows us to move faster than light." "It looks ordinary," Hyun-Ki observed. "Most revolutionary things do," Eleanor said with a slight smile. "I designed the first prototype in a maintenance shed using spare parts and theoretical mathematics that most established scientists had rejected." She turned to face him directly. "Do you know why I succeeded where corporate research teams with billion-credit budgets failed?" Hyun-Ki shook his head. "Because I approached the problem from a different perspective. I wasn't trained to think within established parameters. I grew up poor on Earth, the daughter of sanitation workers. I saw possibilities others missed because I hadn't been taught they were impossible." She gestured toward the workers below. "Every person on this station brings a unique perspective shaped by their experiences. The maintenance technician might see a solution the chief engineer misses. The cargo handler might notice a pattern the navigator overlooks." Hyun-Ki began to understand what she was showing him, and passengers in standard cabin might have insights that first-class travelers don't. "Exactly." Eleanor nodded approvingly. "When we divide people into categories, first class, standard class, crew, passenger, we limit our collective potential. We create artificial barriers that prevent us from solving problems together." They watched in silence as the repair team worked with precise coordination. Each person knew their role, but they also communicated constantly, sharing observations and suggestions regardless of rank. Well, Mija, you and your children deserve the same respect and care as any passenger aboard this vessel. Eleanor turned to address the entire gathering again. From this moment forward, I'm initiating a company-wide policy review. We will maintain different comfort levels for different fare structures. That's simple economics. But we will not tolerate differences in respect or basic service quality. Captain Jin nodded firmly. I fully support this initiative, Dr. Washington. From his position at the refreshment table, Hyun-ki watched the scene unfold with growing anxiety. His career at Galactic Transit Industries was surely over. He had directly discriminated against the company's founder. The shame was almost unbearable. To his shock, Dr. Washington approached him directly. Flight attendant Hyun-ki, she said clearly enough for nearby passengers to hear. I believe you have something to share with our gathering. Hyun-ki froze, horrified at being put on the spot. But Eleanor's expression held no malice, only expectation. He began, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. I treated Dr. Washington poorly when I didn't know who she was. I moved her from first class to standard cabin based solely on her appearance. I made assumptions about her worth as a person based on superficial judgments. The room had gone completely silent. And what have you learned from this experience? Eleanor prompted gently. Hyun-ki looked at her directly for the first time. That I was wrong. That my behavior was unacceptable. That every passenger deserves equal respect, regardless of appearance or cabin class. Eleanor nodded. Thank you for your honesty. That's the first step toward real change. She turned back to address the entire gathering. We'll be arriving at Outpost Epsilon in a few hours for necessary repairs. During our stay, I invite all of you to join me for a special tour of the quantum drive systems. Perhaps understanding the technology that brings us together across the stars will help remind us of our common humanity. As the reception continued, Eleanor moved among the passengers, listening to their stories and experiences. For the first time in the Celestial Voyager's history, passengers from all cabin classes mingled freely, sharing the same refreshments and attention from the crew. Hyun-ki, still processing his public confession, found himself approached by Captain Jin. Dr. Washington has requested you assist her personally during the remainder of the journey, the captain informed him. She believes in second chances and learning opportunities. I suggest you don't waste this one. Hyun-ki nodded, understanding the gravity of both his mistake and the unexpected opportunity for redemption. The lessons of this revelation would change not just his career, but his entire perspective on human value and dignity. Outpost Epsilon loomed large through the viewport as the Celestial Voyager approached. The massive space station resembled a metal spider clinging to the edge of an asteroid field, its long docking arms extended to welcome ships of all sizes. Solar collectors spread like delicate wings, capturing energy from the nearby red dwarf star. Mining vessels darted between the asteroids, harvesting precious metals and rare elements. Hyun-ki stood beside Dr. Washington on the observation deck. His new role as her personal assistant had come with no instructions, only the expectation that he would anticipate her needs and learn from the experience. He had spent the last hour preparing a detailed schedule for their 4-hour layover while repairs were completed. The station administrator has arranged a private dining room for you, Hyun-ki reported. And the quantum engineering team will be available for consultation at your convenience. Eleanor shook her head. Cancel the private dining arrangement. I'll eat with the other passengers in the main concourse. But Dr. Washington, your privacy has already been compromised on this journey, she finished with a small smile. Besides, I didn't build this company to isolate myself from the people we serve. Thank you for your warm welcome, though I would have preferred to continue my journey in anonymity. Her voice was soft, but carried a natural authority that commanded attention. Since that's no longer possible, I'd like to take this opportunity to speak with all of you about the future of space travel. The crowd gathered closer. Among them was the young mother from the standard cabin, with her two sleepy children. Eleanor smiled at them before continuing. 50 years ago, when I began my career as a maintenance technician on Earth's orbital platforms, the idea of traveling to another star system seemed like a fantasy. The journey to Proxima Centauri took decades even with our best ships. She moved through the crowd as she spoke, making eye contact with passengers of all backgrounds. I was often the only woman of color on the maintenance crews. Many doubted my abilities or questioned my presence. But I persisted because I believed space travel should be accessible to everyone, not just the privileged few from wealthy Earth nations. Hyun-ki, serving drinks at the edge of the gathering, felt each word like a personal rebuke. When I developed the quantum field stabilizer, many corporations wanted to keep the technology exclusive, available only to those who could pay premium prices. Eleanor's expression hardened slightly. I refused. I founded Galactic Transit Industries with one core principle: to make the stars accessible to all of humanity, regardless of wealth, origin, or status. She paused, looking around the room. Today, I'm disappointed to see that while our ships can cross interstellar space in days rather than decades, we still maintain the old divisions among ourselves. Different cabins, different treatment, different levels of respect based on perceived status. An uncomfortable silence fell over the crowd. Several first-class passengers shifted awkwardly. I travel anonymously several times a year to observe how our principles are being implemented. Eleanor continued more gently. Sometimes I travel in luxury cabins, sometimes in standard. I watch and learn from every journey. Captain Jin stepped forward. Dr. Washington, I want to personally apologize for any lapses in service you experienced. I assure you that the crew member responsible will be disciplined appropriately. Eleanor shook her head. That's not what I want, Captain. Punishing individuals doesn't address systemic problems. Instead, I'd like to share something with all of you. She activated a small holographic projector from her pocket. Above her palm, a three-dimensional image appeared. A younger Eleanor in a maintenance uniform, standing before a complex engine assembly. This was taken 38 years ago on the Jupiter station. I was testing early prototypes of the quantum field generator. The image changed to show her working alongside a diverse team. None of us came from privileged backgrounds. We were maintenance workers, practical engineers, people who understood systems from the ground up rather than from theoretical models. The hologram shifted again, showing the first successful test of the quantum drive. We succeeded because we valued every perspective, every contribution. The breakthrough that made interstellar travel possible came from a collaborative environment where no one was considered less important than anyone else. She closed her hand, and the hologram disappeared. I built this company on that same principle, yet somehow, over the years, we've allowed the old hierarchies to creep back in. First class, business class, standard class. These distinctions go beyond simple differences in comfort. They've become divisions in human dignity. The young mother from standard cabin stepped forward hesitantly. Dr. Washington, your ships have made it possible for families like mine to reunite. Before your quantum drives, we could never have afforded to visit my husband on Proxima. Even in standard cabin, we're grateful for this opportunity. Eleanor smiled warmly at her. What's your name? Meija, the woman replied. And these are my children, Subin and Taiho. The regulations were written based on my recommendations, Eleanor replied calmly. And I'm recommending we make an exception now. The ship shuddered violently one last time. Then gradually the vibrations began to subside. The emergency lights stopped flashing as systems returned to normal operation. It's working, Jae Young said in amazement, watching the stabilizer readings return to acceptable levels. Eleanor nodded. The field is rebalancing, but this is only a temporary solution. We'll need to make a stop for proper recalibration. The nearest facility equipped for quantum drive maintenance is Outpost Epsilon. That's a 6-hour detour, Captain Jin noted. 6 hours is better than being stranded in the void, Eleanor replied simply. Captain Jin ordered the navigation team to plot a course for Outpost Epsilon. Then he turned to Eleanor with profound respect. "Dr. Washington, you saved this ship and everyone aboard. I can't thank you enough. But if I may ask, why are you traveling on a commercial flight? You have access to private vessels that make the Celestial Voyager look primitive by comparison." Eleanor smiled slightly. "I travel incognito several times a year. I test my own products and observe the real customer experience. No one recognizes me because no one expects to see the owner of Galactic Transit Industries sitting in standard cabin." Hyun-Ki shifted uncomfortably, remembering how he had relocated her without hesitation. "I learn more this way than from any executive report," Eleanor continued. "Today, for instance, I've learned quite a lot about how different passengers are treated aboard my ships." Captain Jin glanced sharply at Hyun-Ki, who looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. "We'll discuss that matter later," Eleanor said. "For now, I suggest you make an announcement to reassure the passengers, and perhaps offer complimentary refreshments to everyone, not just those in first class." As the captain left to make the announcement, Eleanor turned to the engineering console again. "Now let me show you a maintenance procedure that isn't in the manual. This knowledge might save lives someday." Min and Jae-young watched in awe as the legendary designer of their ship's most critical systems provided a masterclass in quantum field theory and practical application. Meanwhile, throughout the ship, passengers breathed sighs of relief as the crisis passed, unaware that the elderly woman who had been relegated to the back of the ship was the reason they would live to reach their destination. The news spread through the Celestial Voyager like wildfire. Whispers passed from passenger to passenger across all cabin classes. Dr. Eleanor Washington, the Eleanor Washington, was aboard their ship. Not only had she saved them from a potential disaster, but she had been traveling incognito, observing the service and operations firsthand. For Hyun-Ki, the revelation brought a sickening wave of shame. He stood rigidly at his service station, enduring the sideways glances from his colleagues. Jun-Seo had at least been smart enough to call in sick for the remainder of his shift. Hyun-Ki wasn't afforded that luxury. Captain Jin had specifically ordered him to continue his duties. "The doctor requested you remain on staff," the captain had informed him coldly. "Consider it an opportunity to demonstrate improved service." Now Hyun-Ki watched as Eleanor moved freely through the ship, speaking with passengers in all cabin classes. She had changed from her simple travel clothes into a modest but unmistakably well-crafted outfit that marked her as someone of importance. Around her neck hung a small pendant with the Galactic Transit Industries logo, a quantum field symbol overlapping stars in 3 dimensions. The ship's course had been adjusted to reach Outpost Epsilon for repairs. The massive space station orbited a red dwarf star at the edge of an asteroid field, serving as both a mining operation headquarters and emergency repair facility. They would arrive in approximately 4 hours. Captain Jin had organized an impromptu reception in the ship's main lounge to honor Dr. Washington. All passengers were invited regardless of cabin class, a first in the Celestial Voyager's operational history. Eleanor entered the lounge to enthusiastic applause. She smiled graciously but seemed uncomfortable with the attention. Captain Jin stepped forward to formally introduce her. "Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Eleanor Washington, founder of Galactic Transit Industries and the brilliant mind behind the quantum field technology that makes our interstellar journeys possible." More applause filled the room. Eleanor raised her hand gently to quiet the crowd. Eleanor reached into her travel bag and produced a small metallic badge with the Galactic Transit Industries logo and her identification code. "Because I designed it. I'm Dr. Eleanor Washington." Hyun-Ki's eyes widened in shock. The name was unmistakable. Everyone in the space transportation industry knew of Dr. Washington. Her quantum field manipulation theories had revolutionized interstellar travel. More importantly, she owned Galactic Transit Industries, the entire company he worked for. "Dr. Washington." "But," he stammered, "there's no time. Take me to engineering now," she commanded. Hyun-ki quickly used his access code to open the security door. As they hurried through the crew corridor, the ship's vibrations grew more intense. Emergency lights flashed as various systems began triggering warnings. In the cramped engine control room, Engineer Min and his assistant Jae-young worked frantically at their consoles. Captain Jin stood behind them, his face tense as he watched the deteriorating readings. "Captain, the quantum field is collapsing," Min reported. "The automated systems can't stabilize it. If we don't drop out of hyperspace in the next 10 minutes, we risk catastrophic drive failure." "There's nowhere to drop," Captain Jin snapped. "We're in the void between systems. The nearest outpost is still 40 minutes away at maximum conventional speed. If the drive fails completely," Min continued grimly, "conventional engines won't have enough power to reach anywhere habitable. Life support would fail long before we reached help." Hyun-ki cleared his throat nervously. "Captain, I apologize for the interruption, but not now." Captain Jin barked without turning around. "Sir," Hyun-ki persisted, "Dr. Eleanor Washington is here." The room fell silent. All heads turned toward the elderly woman standing in the doorway. "Dr. Washington," Captain Jin whispered in disbelief. She nodded once and moved directly to the main control panel. "Your primary stabilizer is overcompensating for a fluctuation in the tertiary grid. The automated systems aren't programmed to recognize this specific pattern." She studied the readouts, her experienced eyes taking in information faster than the younger engineers could process it. "It's a design limitation I've been meaning to address. Fortunately, there's a manual override procedure." Eleanor's fingers moved across the control panel with practiced precision despite her age. "Reroute auxiliary power through the secondary buffer," she instructed. "We need to create a harmonic resonance to counter the fluctuation." Min looked to the captain for confirmation. "Do exactly as she says," Captain Jin ordered immediately. The engineering team scrambled to follow Eleanor's instructions. She worked methodically, making minor adjustments to power distribution and field integrity that weren't in any official maintenance manual. Jun-seo appeared at the door, breathless from running. "Captain, passengers are getting frightened. The gravity fluctuations." He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Eleanor at the control panel. His eyes widened in recognition, then embarrassment as he remembered how he had treated her earlier. "Tell the passengers we're experiencing a temporary hyperspace anomaly," Captain Jin instructed. "Assure them the situation is under control." As Jun-seo hurried away, Eleanor continued her work. "Increase power to the quantum field generator by 17%, she directed. "But first, disengage the safety protocols on channels 3 through 7. "That's against all safety regulations," Min protested. A short while later, a small bot rolled through the cabin offering basic refreshments, water and standard nutrition bars. In first class, Eleanor knew passengers were enjoying handcrafted cocktails and fresh meals prepared by the ship's culinary team. From her new seat, Eleanor could observe more of the ship's operations. She watched the crew interactions with professional interest. The Celestial Voyager represented a significant investment for Galactic Transit Industries, her company, though none of the crew knew that. She made these anonymous journeys quarterly, gathering data that executive reports would never show. She noticed how Hyun-ki treated the few non-human passengers with barely concealed discomfort. When a Proximan diplomat boarded mid-journey at the asteroid relay station, the attendant kept physical distance while providing service, despite Proximans being completely safe for human contact. Eleanor made mental notes of everything she observed. The ship itself was performing beautifully. Her quantum stabilizer design had revolutionized long-distance space travel, making the journey to Proxima Centauri possible in days rather than years. But the human element of the journey showed significant room for improvement. 3 hours into the flight, Eleanor felt a slight vibration beneath her feet, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable to her trained senses. She placed her hand against the wall panel, feeling the subtle rhythm of the engines. Something was wrong with the hyperspace drive. Most passengers continued their activities, unaware of any issue. The mother across the aisle had finally gotten her children to sleep, but Eleanor recognized the vibration pattern. She had designed the system herself, after all. This wasn't a minor fluctuation. It was the beginning of a potential cascade failure. Before she could decide how to respond, the ship lurched sideways. The cabin lights flickered briefly, and the artificial gravity wavered. Several passengers gasped in surprise. Captain Jin's voice came over the communication system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. There's no cause for concern, but please remain in your seats with safety restraints engaged until further notice." Eleanor knew better. The distinctive vibration had intensified. If her analysis was correct, they had less than 20 minutes before a complete drive failure. Quietly, she unfastened her safety restraint and stood up. It was time to make a difficult choice: remain anonymous and hope the crew could handle the situation, or reveal her identity and risk the complications that would follow. Another violent shudder made the decision for her. Eleanor moved swiftly through the standard cabin toward the crew section. The ship trembled again, stronger this time. Passengers looked around with growing concern. The mother across the aisle clutched her children tightly, whispering reassurances. She clearly didn't believe herself. The red emergency lights activated along the floor panels, a subtle warning system designed not to cause panic, but to guide passengers in case of evacuation. Eleanor knew this meant the situation was deteriorating faster than she had anticipated. At the security door separating passenger areas from crew sections, Eleanor pressed her hand against the scanner. It wouldn't recognize her biometrics. She wasn't listed as crew on this journey, but she needed to get someone's attention. After several attempts, Hyun-ki appeared on the other side, looking annoyed at the interruption. "Ma'am, this is a restricted area. All passengers must remain seated with safety restraints engaged," he said firmly. "I need to speak with your engineering team immediately," Eleanor replied. "The quantum stabilizer is failing. I recognize the vibration pattern." Hyun-ki's expression shifted from annoyance to condescension. "Ma'am, I understand you're concerned, but our crew is fully trained to handle any technical issues. Please return to your seat." The ship lurched violently, throwing both of them against the wall. The artificial gravity flickered momentarily, causing several objects to float before crashing back down. "This isn't a minor technical issue," Eleanor insisted. "The quantum field is destabilizing. If not addressed within the next 15 minutes, the drive will fail completely." "And how could you possibly know that?" Hyun-ki scoffed. Dr. Eleanor Washington settled into her first-class seat on the Celestial Voyager, the flagship cruiser of Galactic Transit Industries. At 78, her dark skin showed the marks of age, but her eyes remained as sharp as they had been during her years of scientific work. She wore simple clothes for comfort rather than to impress anyone. The Celestial Voyager was the most advanced passenger ship traveling between Earth and the outer colonies. Its sleek design featured quantum-stabilized gravity and luxury accommodations for those who could afford them. The ship's enormous windows showed the swirling blues and purples of hyperspace as they traveled faster than light toward Proxima Centauri. Eleanor watched as other passengers boarded. Business people in expensive suits, celebrities wearing the latest Earth fashions, and a few wealthy tourists excited about visiting the colonies. She noticed how the flight attendants treated them with extreme attention, bowing slightly and using formal language. Flight attendant Hyun-ki moved through the cabin, checking passenger comfort with practiced efficiency. His black uniform was perfectly pressed, and his smile appeared whenever he approached a passenger. He paused when he noticed Eleanor. Hyun-ki studied the elderly woman with barely hidden disapproval. She didn't match his mental image of a first-class passenger. Her simple travel suit lacked designer labels, and she wore practical shoes instead of the latest fashion. Most telling to him, she carried a worn leather bag instead of the synthetic luxury brands preferred by the wealthy. "Excuse me, ma'am." Hyun-ki approached with his professional smile. "May I see your boarding pass?" Eleanor handed over her credentials without speaking. She had seen that look before, the subtle evaluation, the quick judgment based on appearance rather than substance. Hyun-ki frowned slightly as he scanned her ticket. It was valid, but something must be wrong. Perhaps she had been upgraded due to a computer error or through some discount program for senior citizens. First class on the Celestial Voyager cost more than most people earned in 3 months. At that moment, Captain Jin's voice came over the communication system. "Attention, crew. We have a minor mechanical issue affecting the environmental systems in forward sections. Please prepare for passenger redistribution in first class." Hyun-ki saw his opportunity. "It seems there's a technical issue in this section, ma'am. We need to reassign several passengers." His eyes quickly scanned the cabin, moving past younger, well-dressed travelers. "I'm afraid we'll need to relocate you to our standard cabin." Eleanor looked at him directly. "Is there a specific reason I was selected for relocation?" "We're optimizing passenger distribution based on oxygen consumption requirements." Hyun-ki replied smoothly, using technical language to discourage questions. "The standard cabin is quite comfortable, I assure you." Eleanor nodded and gathered her simple travel bag. As she followed Hyun-ki toward the rear of the ship, she noticed his completely different behavior toward other passengers, particularly those with lighter skin or obvious wealth markers. He bowed deeply to a famous singer and practically tripped over himself, helping a corporate executive adjust his seat settings. His colleague Jun Seo was doing the same at the other end of the cabin. When a businessman complained about a minor temperature issue, both attendants rushed to assist him, ignoring an older woman of mixed Martian-Earth heritage who was struggling with her overhead storage. The standard cabin was cramped compared to first class. Instead of the 2-meter personal space pods, passengers sat in rows of seats with minimal reclining capability. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier here, a cost-saving measure that reduced power consumption in economy sections. Eleanor took her new seat without complaint. A young mother with 2 small children sat across the aisle, trying to keep them entertained during the long journey. The woman looked exhausted. "First time to the colonies?" Eleanor asked her with a gentle smile. The woman nodded. "My husband works in the mining operations. We haven't seen him in person for 2 years. The adjustment period can be difficult," Eleanor said, "but the educational opportunities for children are excellent there." As they talked, Eleanor noticed Hyun-ki and Jun Seo passing through on their way back to first class. They barely glanced at the standard cabin passengers, moving quickly as if eager to return to more important duties. "The attendants seem busy," the young mother noted. "They certainly have priorities," Eleanor replied diplomatically.